Thank you so much for coming tonight. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here to speak to you tonight. It is always an honor to share my heart on what must be one of the most horrific things facing our country right now, and that is sex trafficking. A little bit of history on me so that you understand where I'm coming from and the way my mind thinks. I'm a past serial entrepreneur, and I've had many businesses in many different markets. Predominantly, if you looked at my entire career, would have been in real estate, whether it's construction or development or rentals, things of that nature. But the long and short is, all the different businesses that I have been in, I've learned that there is a product, and that product is sold, and it's sold for money, and there is a supply of that product, and there's a demand for that product. And so in this very first segment, what I'd like to talk to you about will be the supply. And then that's going to be some stats. That's going to be the victim side of this, the restoration side of this sex slavery. And then later on, the next segment, we'll move to the demand piece. And then finally, we'll move to my favorite piece. It's the pricelessness of women. So that's what you have in store for you over these three segments. And let me just get started, jump right in on the supply. I always carry a coin in my pocket. It reminds me of slavery. One side will be the supply. One side of it's going to be the demand. And then this little thin edge that everybody's always interested in, and those people that know me and my personality think that's where I spend most of my time, that's in the rescue side of it. The reality is, it's a thin edge because that's about how much is being done in our country. And I bring up the thin edge first and then move from there into supply, because what you have to understand is that thin edge represents just a few hundred males and females a year in the USA, a few hundred that are actually rescued and pulled from this life. Just a few hundred. And whereas we talk about the supply, that I'm about to tell you will be close to 500,000 children under 18 that are being sex trafficked in our country right now. You'll have to understand why there's so much in the supply and so little on this rescue side, and what we're going to need to do as a nation to combat that. So the supply side. We're talking about females. We're talking about the commercial sex trade. We're talking about the product that I will describe to you as rape, non-consensual sex. That's what the supply is. A supply of available bodies, male and female. To jump into the stats, everyone being trafficked, the stats are 80% female, 20% male. And so a lot of times I'm going to say she, and that's just because the largest piece of the pie are females. And so I certainly am not forgetting about the supply of men, males. And the reality is, normally when you're talking about the supply of sex trafficked males, you're talking about boys. Boys. So the stat for the Department of Justice back in 2012, 2013, when they did a study, they estimated there was between 100 and 300,000 minor, under 18, minor children being trafficked in the United States, the USA. Now, people want to say that this is something that happens overseas. That's always the opening. I had no idea. And if I did have an idea, I thought it was over there. I didn't know it was over here. And if it is over here, it must be a big city. Is it New York City? Is it Houston, Texas? You know, it's everywhere. It's the United States of America. It's every big city. It's every small city. In fact, if you have more than 5 to 10 men in any one place, would be easy to assume that sex trafficking is taking place, because it is admitted amongst men, adult men, that 1 out of 5 men has paid for commercial sex. 1 out of 5. 10 men in a room, that'd be 2 out of the 10 have paid for sex before. And so there's your demand, but they have to be having sex with somebody, so there has to be a supply. And yes, I would then tell you, wherever you're going to group men, you're going to find a supply of females to meet that demand in the United States of America. Now, that was a 2012 statistic. And 2012 to 2018, 6 years later, I think that I can safely say that number has grown to 500,000. And I'm going to say minors, and over 6 years, those who were 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 are now considered adults. Now considered adults. So there's been a whole new batch. I don't even know really, I guess I should know the word, but I don't know the word. A whole new group of people that have been introduced into the commercial sex trade, sex trafficking, sex slavery. I'm going to use all those words. They are all meaning of the same. So we have 500,000 now. Well, how could it be growing that fast? Because it is the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. And it is the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the USA. As far as volume's concerned, it's third in the world, and it's third in the USA as far as criminal enterprise. It is third only to drugs and the arms trade. And it's the fastest growing, so it will be overtaking arms, and eventually, I believe, that it'll be overtaking drugs. Because unfortunately, the supply, gaining a supply of females to make your money is easier than it is to gain a supply of weapons or drugs. See, 80% of the females, 80% of the boys that are being trafficked in this country are from this country. So if you learn something about the supply tonight, no, it is not happening in other countries. No, it is not called human trafficking as if we are trafficking drugs across the border. Therefore, we must be trafficking and smuggling bodies across the border. That's not what it is. In fact, I don't even like the name human trafficking. I think it does a terrible job of misleading and deceiving the public as to the problem of what's really going on. What's really going on as our children in this country are being lured, they're being forcefully taken, they're being fraudulently sold stories, they're being coerced, they're being blackmailed into becoming sex slaves. So it's an American problem, and it's made up of American girls. Now, are those girls, are those young boys, are they white? Yes, they are. Are they black? Yes, they are. Are they Latino? Yes, they are. Are they Asian? Yes, they are. Are they coming from the uneducated streets? Yes. Poverty areas? Yes. Suburbs? Yes. College-aged, intelligent females? Yes. Yes. And in the next segment, I'll talk about demand, and I'll explain why it is that every single type of female, blondes, brunettes, redheads, freckles, no freckles, teeth, no teeth, ponytails, no ponytails. Every type of female, all the way across the spectrum, is at risk of being manipulated and being drawn into the sex trade. Big cities, small towns. We see it all. And if you live in a small town outside of a big city, that's probably the riskiest of all, because they can go into the suburbs to find the young ladies to take into the city to meet the demand of that city. So we know what the girls look like. It's every girl. How about the age? The age of these females. I talk about minors, I talk about boys, I talk about girls, I talk about ladies. The average age of a sex-trafficked female is 13. 13. 13. That's the average age. If that's the average age, well, that would have to be 12 and 14 and 11 and 15. We've been a part of helping to get girls rescued as young as 5 and 6, 9. And if I wanted to horrify you, I'd change that around and I'd say 9 and 6 and 5. And your mind would begin to twist out of shape because you can't understand that kind of evil. You can't understand that kind of perversion. And thank God I can't either. But it doesn't change the truth that there are girls of that age being trafficked. Where do these girls come from? Runaways? Girls who are in broken families and broken homes. Girls who have already been sexually abused by people they know, family members, guardians, neighbors, extended family. It's a national stat, and we've learned this stat from all the people that have been rescued, all the victims that have been rescued out of the sex trade. It's a known stat that in the first 48 hours of running away, 100%, that's every single runaway in the first 48 hours, is going to be approached and offered the sex trade as a way to make it to day 3. You know, I ran away as a young child, and I made it all the way from my back porch to my tree house. And I had a couple cans of Beanie Weenies. And I ate those, and then a couple hours later, I was hungry, and it was dinner time. So I just left the tree house, and I went back to the house, and Mom and Dad never even knew I'd run away. But I was a little kid. And whatever I was in trouble for, I probably deserved. But when you're 15, 16, 17 years old, and you run away, you have a little more stamina, but you still don't necessarily have a car. You still don't necessarily have a job, money. You're trying to escape town. And really, by the end of that second day, you're sitting on a stoop. You haven't eaten in a day or two. It might or might not be that you're standing out in the rain. It might or might not be that you're freezing cold. And so when somebody who is trained to see that, and not somebody trained like you and I who's going to be looking now and thinking, oh my gosh, she could have run away, she could be homeless, she could be trafficked if I don't stop my car or stop walking down the sidewalk and have a conversation with her and offer her some other solution. Not that we are going to be the trained people, but let me tell you who is trained. Traffickers are trained. Highly trained. Incredible manipulators. And they will come along and spot these girls, spot these boys, and go up and offer them food, and go up and offer them shelter, and take them in. Love on them. Oh, I know what you're going through. I went through the same thing. Come with me. I'll be your new best friend. I'll be everything to you. And after a few days of eating and a few nights of cold, that really sounds good. And do you know, of the 100% who are offered that form of protection in the first 48 hours, 33% end up being sex trafficked. I come from a city, Charlotte, North Carolina. Charlotte, North Carolina has 10,000 runaways a year. A year. So the stats would tell us that's 3,000 girls a year, just in one city in America, 3,000 girls a year are ending up being sex trafficked, just from the runaway population. How else does the supply make it into the supply chain? Well, some of you have probably seen the now famous movie Taken, and so we're all worried about our daughters being snatched off the street. That was in another country, but we can easily take that fear and bring it here to America. And yes, there are females that are getting kidnapped off the street. But let me just enlighten you a little bit. The amount of females and males being snatched off the street is such a small percentage. Not so small that we shouldn't bring it up. Let's say it's going to be 5, 10%. So we need to be aware. We need to teach our young ladies and our young men how to be self-aware when they're out in places. But let me tell you what. The runaway population is a percentage. The snatched off the street, the kidnapped is a certain percentage. But in today's society, American culture, there's something called the Romeo pimp. The Romeo pimp is a trafficker, and by the way, handler, pimp, trafficker, if you hear any of those three words, we're all talking about the same thing. I'm going to talk a little bit more about pimping in the demand side, but for now, understand that those three terms are all synonymous. The Romeo pimp is the guy that comes along and becomes the boyfriend. There's something called grooming. Grooming is where I pretend to be whatever is missing in that young lady's life. Whatever it is. Now I'm getting older and I'm wiser, and my skill set has been honed over decades. And I would tell you that I can mind whip any 16-year-old in this country. I just mind whip. And you know what? I would guess to say that traffickers are better than me. They're master manipulators. So when they walk up to a female from a broken home, or she doesn't like her mother, or she's got a problem with dad, they become that. You need a father figure? I'll become your father figure. You're poor? I'll become your bank. I'll become whatever emotionally you need. I'll become that. And because I become your source for that, the one thing that's most important to you that you're missing, I become the most important thing to you. And once I become the most important thing to you, you're going to fall in love with me. So few times do I think back to how crazy the chemicals were in my brain when I was in my early teens. The thoughts that I had, and what was important, and what was a life or death decision. At that time it was, did I have the right comb in my pocket? Did I wear the right jacket? Did I have on the right Converse? And if I didn't, that could be life or death on the playground. Did I join the right clique of people? Did I have the right car? Did my hair look a certain way? Did I have the right dress? Not that I wore a dress, but I know that's important to some of you. And if you could have somebody provide those things, that became your source of everything. That becomes your source of life. And these Romeo pimps know that. Suffice to say, 55% of all trafficked males and females right now are being brought in by Romeo pimps. And I'm talking never have physically touched the girl or boy one time. They have formed a relationship built on lies and deceit, because they are the liar, they are the deceiver. They have picked out an innocent, gullible, needy person to manipulate. And they are mind whipping them. Listen, not to mix in another cause, but bullying is real in our country right now on social media. Young high schoolers are killing themselves because they've been bullied. Nobody ever hit them. They're just saying things about them. So the opposite power, that's the death. Somebody is actually offering these boys and girls life, seemingly life, a deceptive lie, but to that manipulatable individual, it's life. Snatched off the streets, yeah, it happens. Running away, end up being provided something and then drawn in. Happens certainly that way. But we need to understand where the hearts and the minds of our children are. We need to understand that there are people out there that are going to tell them things that they will believe. So we need to take an opportunity to make sure that our children, my children, your children, do not end up a part of the supply chain by simply speaking truth into their lives and making sure that there are no holes in their hearts that somebody else can fill. Does that make sense to everybody? Good. Because that's important. At some point in the segment, or at the end of one of these segments, somebody's going to come up and say, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? And I'm telling you right now, that was the first thing that you can do, and probably the most important thing you can do as far as the supply side of this coin is concerned, is speaking into young people's lives. Now here's something that's interesting. A master manipulator can line up 5 young ladies, let's just say 5 16-year-olds, and he can go up to the first one and say, you sure are pretty. And let's say she says thank you and just sticks her hand out and shakes it. He'll move on to the next and say, you sure are pretty. And maybe this girl goes, you know, he doesn't really even need to move to 3, 4, and 5. He's already got a girl with poor self-image, and he has an inroad into her life. It can be just that easy. So social media, powerful tool. Grooming, powerful tool. Why would a trafficker spend the time to groom a child to become a sex slave? Why would they put in that kind of time and effort? Well, another stat. This 13-year-old, the average age, 13-year-old, she's going to be forced to have sex 10 to 15 times per day, every day. 10 to 15 times a day, every day. They don't take off for Christmas. They don't take off for Easter. They don't take off for 4th of July. They don't take off because it's raining outside. They don't take off because it's snowing outside. These young ladies have a quota placed on them of $1,000 per day. And so it doesn't matter whether it's a $100 sex act or a $50 sex act. And it doesn't matter whether it's going to be 10 times or 15 times. They're not going to be done for the day until they've made that $1,000 quota. Multiply that times 365 days in a year, and that girl is worth $365,000 to a trafficker. Now, I don't know what all you guys make here as far as your annual income, but for $350,000 a year, I'm willing to put forth a little effort. And if I was guaranteed that money for what is an average lifespan of 7 years, it's the average lifespan of a female that is put into trafficking. 13-year-old's going to age out at 20. So for a 7-year guaranteed income of $350,000, who in the room would not put in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, becoming everything to one of these girls. And then when mom or single dad works a double Friday and Saturday, he says, meet me here, baby, we're going to run away together. They leave Friday as soon as mom goes off to work or dad goes off to work. Most likely the second or third job that mom or dad's trying to provide for them. It's not that they're bad people, they're just not there. But that manipulator is there, that trafficker is there, that groomer is there. And as soon as that parent goes off to work, they hop in a car and drive away. And it's Saturday or Sunday, depending on the lies, before mom or dad even knows their child is gone. And hey, there's plenty of children out there that don't have a mom or dad. Who's there to watch out for them? Who's there to watch out for them? $350,000 for 7 years. We're talking millions of dollars per girl. Most traffickers are going to have anywhere between 3 and 5 girls. When you start moving into organized trafficking, you're going to be into the hundreds. Move it up and down coastlines, moving east to west, very organized systems. And really, for that kind of money, it can be very organized. Do you know we spend $10 billion, that's like my name, Bo, B, billion, $10 billion annually, every single year, to have sex with these girls. It's a $10 billion USA problem. Now, I don't know how many of you have had $10 billion. So let me give you an example of just how much money that is. That is more money than is spent on all professional sports combined. Football, basketball, baseball, soccer combined. So we've got a huge problem. And so as you're thinking about who these traffickers would be that are providing this supply, they might have jeans down around mid-thigh, no belt, a couple of gold teeth, your stereotypical pimp and thug that pops into your head. They very well also might be a very well-dressed, nice suit, nice tie, well-manicured, male, married, kids, that has fallen into the evil deception himself of trafficking to make that $350,000 a year so that he can be successful. And he's probably, because he is, on top of his game, using his skill set for the dark side, but a skill set nonetheless. What's he got? 3 girls, 5 girls? He's probably knocking down $1 million, $1.5 million a year. And for that kind of money, I could become pretty sophisticated and I could really have a good system. And you know what? There are traffickers that do. And not to point my finger at male traffickers, do you know 42% of traffickers are female? Female. Can you imagine how easy it would be for a female to manipulate another female? I mean, talk about lack of barriers. A poor, cold, my mommy hates me, I haven't eaten in 2 days, it's raining, and a mother figure comes along with an umbrella and takes her in. How safe is that going to seem? Listen, the foster care industry in our country is not what it should be. And I don't want to pick on it because there's a lot of people in foster care that have incredible hearts and have opened the doors to their homes to all kinds of orphans. And we should. We need to. We need to be doing more of it. There's another cause that I stand behind is foster care. People opening up their homes, opening up their families. open up their hearts, open up their lives, open up their pocketbooks, open up a room, open up their time. We need to do that really for every single sex trafficking victim. What better place to do that than through foster care? But one of the most disturbing stories I ever heard was about a foster care mother who was trafficking two young sisters. I don't know, I heard that and something inside me just broke. It seems so wrong. It seems so wrong. But what I tell you these stories for is because I don't want you to think that the supply chain is only filled by mean, nasty European, or some mean, nasty street thug gang. Are those people involved? Yes. But you have to be wary of everyone. You have to check your own heart when you're talking about your children. For those of you who have children, for those of you who are married, for those of you single moms and single dads who are working one job or two jobs and you're exhausted, you're going to have to take time to get with your children and make sure that they're not manipulated. I'm going to, in the third segment, talk about the priceless value of women. And let me tell you something. There are girls being trafficked right now. They're being groomed right now by guys who will go to the mall. They'll find that one girl that has low self-worth, low self-value, that drops her head when she's told she's beautiful, or lights up when she's told she's beautiful because nobody's ever told her before. That's just as bad. He'll pull that person in, take them shopping in the mall, buy them a dress, buy them some new kicks, take them to lunch, take them to dinner in the mall, take them to get a mani-pedi in the mall, spend a couple $100 on them. Oh my gosh, I just met him today. Look at all this. Look at all this. He spent $200 on her. He lures her in. She falls in love. He's a trafficker. Maybe he spends another $200 on her the next weekend, maybe another $200. Maybe 5 weekends in a row he meets her at the mall. So for $1,000, he's bought her. Grooms her right in. For $350,000 a year, that's a great return on your investment. As a businessman, I know this. But here's what just breaks my heart, is that young girl sold herself for $1,000. When I say he bought her for $1,000, he might have given the money to the stores, but her self-worth, she gave herself to him for $1,000, and that's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. Our females in this country are priceless. Priceless. What does priceless mean? Because honestly, I've spoke to groups of high school age girls, and they don't know what I remember the day that a girl raised her hand and said, "Sir, what does priceless mean?" We're not even teaching our children anymore their value at all. We're not even using value words, value definitions. What is priceless? That means no amount of money could be paid, stacked up, gold bars to the ceiling, and pay for you. No amount of anything could be grouped together and given for you. That's what priceless means. So we're going to talk about that in the third segment. I won't get you too far, but at least that'll get you to come back later. I want to return back to the 7 years, the lifespan of the supply. Why 7 years? Because at the end of 7 years, you have suicide. See, the lifespan, I don't just mean they age out and retire. The girls didn't get any of that money. They have been used and abused And I don't have the time, but you can pull out your calculators and you can multiply 10 times 365 times 7. And when you get into the 20-something thousand times these girls have been raped, that's the end of their 7-year career. What does that look like to a body, in a body? A suicide rate that is 200 times greater than a normal young lady, than a normal young man. 200 times. The PTSD of a sex trafficked victim is greater than a veteran returning from war. See, these girls live in a war zone for years. In their mind, they're at war. They're damaged. They're traumatized. So they kill themselves. Kind of makes sense when you listen to everything I've already told you today. And how about disease? AIDS still exists. Syphilis still exists. Trauma can cause disease as well. So the girls are dying from disease. And then the violence. Now I was talking about those Romeo pimps, and I told you they don't even have to hit them to get them into the life, but I promise you, they are physically beating the crap out of them once they have them in the fold to make sure that they stay there. They lure them in with honey, but they keep them with a fist or a whip or a hot iron or boiling water or a knife or a gun. I was talking to one young lady. She was part of a group of girls being trafficked, and the traffickers, only because they could replace these girls so easily and at such a low cost, they would quarterly shoot the girl that gave them the most trouble, and they would shoot her in front of all the other girls. How's that for a business strategy? So the girls end up getting dead from violence. And the reality is you even have the Johns, the consumer demand, the men paying to have sex with these girls. They have some sick fantasies. And so, they're killing these girls too. And you know what? When one of these girls gets killed, the pimp doesn't go, filing a police report. They're just lost. They just replace them. They just replace them. So, you have suicide, you have disease, you have violence, and then you have drugs. How does the drugs play into the supply? Oh, well, they just give them drugs to be compliant. No, actually, quite the contrary from the girls I've talked to. They'll put them on the drugs and then take them off the drugs, because coming off the drugs is so painful that the girls will be begging to get back on the drug. Withdrawal is terrible from the synthetic and chemical drugs that are out there today. Withdrawal from heroin is worse than the hell of heroin itself. Any heroin addict will tell you that. That's why they can't help themselves and they keep on shooting up again, because the last thing they want to do is withdraw. And yes, the girls are willing to do the drugs not because it was forced on them, but because they are so traumatized that they have to take the drugs to self-medicate. I talk in auditoriums, I talk in churches, I talk at civic organizations, but nothing will ever surprise me more than when I was at a church, and after I had spoken and given a message, I had a young lady come up to me and say, "Will you pray for me?" I said, "Certainly, I'll pray for you." And she said, "I need you to pray for all 4 of me." All 4. There's just one girl in front of me. But she had 4 completely separate personalities. One of her personalities was the little girl who had never been trafficked, who existed up until the age where that horror started. And then one girl was the one that always had sex. So every single one of those tens of thousands of rapes happened just to this one girl. So the little girl who had never been trafficked was safe. And then there was another girl who was the defender of these others. And anyway, she was the one that was willing to fight. She stuck up for him. She was the tough one. She was the personality that would take it. But you know what? She very rarely came out. And then the fourth girl was the one standing in front of me that had lived through the lives of all three. That's the kind of damage that's done to a sex trafficking victim. And I wish that had just happened once. But I can't count on my hands and my toes the number of females that have come up and asked me to pray for them in the last 7 years that had multiple personalities. So I know that that is something on a regular basis that's happening. So if one of those 4 personalities would like a little bit of self-medicating just to survive, I get it. And we need to get it because we need to understand these victims are going to come out with issues, trauma issues, drug issues. And then we need to understand that the average rehab time, in fact, rehab's a terrible word. Rehab would be another drug term. 6 weeks, drug rehab, I'm fine, back in the community, back being productive. That is not what happens in trafficking. These girls, on average, could take 3, 4, 5 years before they're normal enough to go back to the supermarket by themselves. 3, 4, 5, 6 years. So if you have a heart for restoring these victims, if you have a heart for these victims, if you want to do something, know that you are stepping into the mud waist deep. And bring a big old shovel so that you can just be heaping love on that girl, because she's going to need patience and love and understanding of which you've never seen. But I challenge you to do that. So that's the supply. It's a lot of females in the world. Millions of females in our country. Millions of minors in our country. And that's the supply. So I implore you to look around you at your own children. I implore you to look around you at other people's children. I implore you to take even a further step and just look around. And when you see a child and she looks distressed, step out, open your mouth, and make sure that she does not become part of the supply chain. So I'll wrap it up right there. The next segment will be on demand. And I appreciate it. Go ahead and take a break and come back and join us.